Talked about on a small level how you can make views do specific things. What do we use to make individual views do specific actions? Liana. What did we use to make individual views do some specific action? Mm-hmm. And what are we, like, what type was that we were using there? Yeah. So we use gesture recognizers to add some add some functionality to a view that might not respond to how we would use that view otherwise. So on the small level, we can make any view do something specific. Kind of did the inverse with the scroll view just now. We said, hey, here's this view, and we can adjust it based on some characteristics of what's contained inside of it. So we've gone from small, doing something big with our gesture recognizer. We've also said from the level of that default view, if we pin that scroll view to our default view, we've said we can actually make the screen appear to be bigger than it is. So we've made individual views do things. We've also accounted for the whole space of the whole screen and made that do something. That's cool. What in your curriculum is actually the title of today's lesson? Keyboard handling. So here's the thing. Has anyone ever used a text field before? For my default view here, what happens when I see a keyboard? What? You want to touch it. But let's say just the space it takes up first.
It moves the view that you're up.
Yep.
So it's another view.
So it slides in the thing that you press all the buttons that you want to touch, right? Blah, 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 blah. I might have to adjust what's in the content view to account for that keyboard coming in. Let's say I had something that is positioned right here. I don't know. Figure it out based on the size of its frame and where it's situated relative to its superclass. Let's say the keyboard pops up and it actually covers part of that view. The keyboard itself has a frame, right? Something that's appearing in the visual space. So we can make adjustments to the position of this view based on the keyboard popping up. What do you think would be a really helpful, I don't know, subclass of UI view to use to keep that content in so that we could move this view and keep it from being overlapped? Yeah. When our keyboard pops up, it's going to overlap this view. What could we put that view in to keep that view from being completely overlapped? So maybe move that view up or make it so we can get to that view. Tia.
No. I'm thinking it should be part of the table view, so one. I don't know.
Okay. All right. We can put this view in something. It'll be really easy. Kevin? Yeah, we can put it in a scroll view. Let's say initially we have a scroll view just like we were looking at here, where it took up the entire screen. If we can find out the size of the keyboard and when it's showing up, we can actually adjust the size maybe of this scroll view to make it only take up the space above the keyboard And then we could scroll through this content to get to all the views that might have been overlapped by the keyboard. Scroll views are pretty cool. Now I know that today was about keyboard handling, but actually knowing about the keyboard is pretty easy. The one main concept is something called Notification Center. Notification Center is a dispatch mechanism that enables the broadcast of information to registered observers. Objects register with a notification center to receive notifications using the add observer methods. When an object adds itself as an observer, it specifies which notifications it should receive. An object may therefore call this method multiple times in order to register itself as an observer. Each running app has a default notification center. So if I've got a type here, it's going to have something called, let's type the words right, default. The app's default notification center. Nemo, what is that an example of? I have an instance of this type that is accessible as a static or a class level property. Yeah, we've seen this before a lot actually. So I have an instance. If we go and look at Notification Center, we're defining Notification Center, and there's actually one instance of a Notification Center. Yeah, there's a singleton, Notification Center. We can register observers, so something that's waiting for some signal, on the same default Notification Center throughout our app. Cool. We can have one central point at which we are saying our app should wait for certain signals. And those certain signals in the notification center are actually like built right into your machine, which is really nice. You might have a notification for the day changing. You might have a notification for receiving a remote message. So you might add an observer, say, in your app for push notifications coming in. You do definitely have notifications for the keyboard coming up, the keyboard coming down. So all we're going to do is, in this view controller, here's the format of what we do. Observer is the thing that is listening and waiting for some notification. In this view controller, the view controller itself is going to be observing. The selector is just like any other action. So the observer, when something happens, and that's what we're going to put in name, should do something. Let's just say, for now, to fill in that space, it will do same thing as tap, gesture, tapped. Some selector. Now here's the fun stuff. For name, we want to find the specific notification that is being sent. I'm going to just start typing. Well, it's not keyboard. Damn. So it looks like it's giving me some options. And this is really annoying. But not all of these notification.name values are stored just on the default notification.name object here. There are also specific ones that are stored on UI responder. Such as keyboard did change frame notification, keyboard did hide notification, keyboard did show notification. So
just if you, because I know we're used to this pattern of seeing something that has like XYZ type dot another name dot another type, it's not going to be available in that default set of notification.name values. Instead, we have to actually look at UI responder, just because of the way this was set up long ago. Then for keyboard did show, this object right now, don't have to worry about. That object is the thing sending this notification, but the thing sending this notification is just the system itself. So you don't have to really worry about that object. If you needed to use this notification center for something else, which like from what I understand, it's becoming very important for Swift UI, which is really exciting, you would need to specify what is sending that notification. For right now, all we need to know is the action we're going to do when the keyboard showed. The action we want to do over here, can someone describe to me what we want that selector to do if we want to account for the change in our scroll view's height? We want to move everything up by the height of the keyboard. Yeah. And I'd say, at least right now, the easiest way to do that, even if it won't move everything fully up, you can play with these constraints. But the biggest thing is to make sure that your scroll view's bottom is set to the top of that keyboard. Then you can play with the content offset, the edges of that guy. Let me make a different function just so we can talk about this. Private func keyboard selector triggered. Now in here, we'll adjust the size of our scroll view, or adjust the position of our views if they're not in a scroll view. Thing is, if they're not in a scroll view, then literally the space outside the keyboard is not scrollable, right? And so any change we make to those views, we won't be able to move through that space. That's why I would suggest putting that stuff in the scroll view. Let me change this so that the selector up here, that's that. And then make sure this has a sender. Because that sender is going to be the notification, which is a container for information broadcast through a notification center to all registered observers. So we've got an observer that we're adding to this view controller. It's a registered observer of this notification that our system sends, which is, hey, the keyboard's coming up. And this is just some information it sends along with it. When that keyboard shows up, we can look in that keyboard notification for something called user info, which is just going to be a dictionary that you can look through. This is already built in. You didn't define the notification for the keyboard showing up, so you don't have to worry about how this is actually defined, but we can, let's print this out. And to do that, I'm going to need to, make this guy UI text field, just so that it'll bring up our keyboard. I know, sorry, just for the example's sake though. into it. Brings up the keyboard. Let's just make sure that works. Add observer. Go to this guy. Click you. All right, so maybe I've got the wrong notification set up here. Added the observer. I'm gonna need to handle that. Let's look at our keyboard stuff. Remember these keywords will and did? I'm going to want to trigger this when the keyboard is going to show up. Post it immediately prior to the display of the keyboard. Let's try running that now. Ah, we made it. We've got some dictionary. I know, I'm sorry. This is something that needs to be interoperable with Objective-C, so it's giving you some really ugly stuff. But it is telling you the keyboard's frame begin, the keyboard center, the keyboard animation duration, the keyboard frame end. It's telling you a whole bunch of size things, and it's telling you, I don't know, like the animation rate. It's telling you how the animation is curving. These are all things we've seen before. Maybe not in this exact form, but they are working just like we're used to. The keyboard shows up and has a certain rectangle in which it takes up the space of. The keyboard has a center, which is some point in the screen. Keyboard animates at a certain rate, and that rate is a quarter of a second. Just like we've set up with our animations. They have a duration. This guy has a duration for when you're about to show up the keyboard. All that is built into the behavior of a keyboard. And so you could use that to do something to the rest of your view controller. I trust you will. I think it'll be great. One thing I'll add just in case you forgot how this worked. Run this. This is more going back to a Unit 2 thing that'll be very important now though. What do we call it when this becomes the view with which I am interacting, Phoenix? This is the first responder. It might be that you need to set up some maybe tap gesture so that you can resign this first responder. Maybe if you were to tap out of this view, you want it to be set up so that this view is no longer the first responder. Just like a UI thing there. In case you get stuck while this keyboard is out, you might want to have some selector, some action set up somewhere else on the screen. Could even just be another view if you want to get it working that has a gesture recognizer that when you tap it, it should resign the current first responder. This is all programmatic UI. It's wonderful. All right. So, cool. Let's take lunch. You guys have a project due today. We'll all be around. And tomorrow is really exciting. Aram's going to make Netflix, supposedly, and then we're going to start our group project.